about a mile from my house, I just lost a shift bushing. So now we've got flimsy little shifter, and I'm gonna need to get towed back. So a good friend of mine is headed this way with an SUV and a rope, and we are gonna try to accomplish just that. So as I've spoken about a few times on here, early 2017 I was able to track down one of my personal unicorn cars, and it's a 1985 Audi 4000S Quattro Brock Yates Cannonball Edition car that was sold by Brumos Audi in 1985, the year I was born. 6 of them through the Jacksonville dealership and 6 of them through Atlanta. And as far as I can tell, mine and the one I mentioned before that's in Seattle are the only 2 out of the 12 that are still known to be in existence. And so I was really excited to get this thing put back together, but as we've discussed in some of the previous videos, our goal of getting it to the 2017 10th anniversary and final running of the 2904 didn't work out. So we bought the 95 Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham limousine and ended up making it across the country. But even though the car didn't make that trip, I still had this goal of eventually getting it running reliably and hopefully one day redeeming its honor by taking it across the country. And so over the last year, and I can't thank everyone enough for all the comments, the messages, the texts, the calls, the Facebook, Instagram, everything, contact to tell us different ideas about some of the issues that we had discussed and given us ideas about how to make the car run. And over the past year, we've done everything from an entire motor replacement. Fortunately, the mechanic that had been working on the car, who was just a savant of all things 80s Audis, he had a motor on hand and we were able to get that swapped in. We've replaced and rebuilt the CIS unit several times. He's been able to go through every filter, every line, everything that could possibly have been starving it of fuel, causing the stalling issue that we had about a year ago. He's been able to go through it and everything is pretty much tip-top mechanically. So about 3.5 weeks ago, it was ready. And I'm not gonna say I didn't sandbag him and tell him it had to be done 6 months ago, but we stayed in touch and he's been great, and I just feed him parts and he puts them on and makes things work. So we've done everything about the fuel system, everything about the motor, everything we could, and finally we had the car ready to run. And it's about 30 miles away from the VINwiki warehouse, so I had gone up there to pick the car up and was bringing it back, and as I was getting off the highway I started to lose some gears, and by the time I was able to limp it into the warehouse, I had lost first and second, and most of the time just had third and fourth, no reverse and no fifth. So as you'd kind of imagine, and as is common on these mid-80s 4000Ss, I'd lost a shift bushing. So I got the car parked, put it up in the air, and had it kind of ready, and fortunately he had a shift bushing on hand, so a couple days later he came by with it and slapped it in there. And the car did great, drove well. I got it home to my house, which is probably 15 minutes away, and the next morning I left to take it to church. And about a half a mile outside of my neighborhood, we lost that shift bushing and lost all the gears that time, so no limping it around anywhere. And so I called a friend that was nearby, and fortunately he had a very useful tow strap, but unfortunately it was too bulky to get through the car's tow hooks. So I ended up having to hold it with my left hand and steer as he tugged me back into my neighborhood, and we got the car into the garage. So shift bushing 3 went in, and it did okay until I drove it about 15 miles back here to the warehouse, and it failed. So limped it in on 3rd gear, got it parked up in the air, and number 4 was on the way. But that time we disassembled things a little bit more extensively, and we found that the shift ball that mates with the bushing was a little bit smaller on the car, and that's why it had kind of been mangling through the replacement bushings. So went back to the drawing board, and fortunately the mechanic that's been working on the car has a side business 3D printing parts for these cars, and he prints the bushings out that are a little bit more durable than the nylon factory ones were, and they're available fortunately. So he was able to redesign it and strengthen it a little bit to mate with the smaller shift ball, and we put that one in the middle of last week. And the goal had been to get the car to Radwood over the weekend. Radwood was coming to Atlanta, and Doug Tabbitt was coming in. He'd bought this ultra beige 190E. Arnie Toman was bringing down his Sigma. Dustin Warless was coming down, and Martin Dyer was bringing his BMW, all period correct. Everybody was dressed like it was the 80s or the 90s, so it was going to be an exciting time, and I really wanted to take the Audi. Obviously the 993 could have been eligible, but it was a great opportunity to kind of redeem this car's honor, and as a test to hopefully get it well on its way to eventually driving from New York to Los Angeles. So at the 11th hour, we swapped in that last bushing, and the car was working. Now, we didn't have air conditioning. We need a laundry list of other things: new clutch, new radiator, new struts, all the other normal things that you'd expect from a mid-80s Audi, but the car was generally behaving itself. So I was really excited at the prospect of getting it to this show, And we did. The car drove great. It was very, very tight on the shift linkage, and I'm sure we still have some adjustment to do because I've always got third, fourth, and fifth now and generally reverse, but first and second remain very, very tricky, but generally usable. I can get the car at this point wherever it needs to go. And fortunately, engine-wise, it's just about as perfect as it's ever been. So the car drives well. We got up to 95 miles an hour, not in Georgia on the way there, and it did great. Very stable, very smooth. Probably needs a little bit of alignment, but overall, as well as I could expect it to run given the circumstance. We made it to the show. We got to hang out with Matt Farah and everybody else that was at Radwood. Just some amazing cars to see out there, and we had a blast, even though it got extremely, extremely hot. So fortunately, we drove home again without air conditioning, but we survived after losing a lot of water weight. And we got the car back. Now there's still a laundry list of punch items to get through to make the car roadworthy for that kind of a long road trip, but I got to talking to the guys at Off the Record, and they're an app that sponsored the channel a couple of months ago, and what they do is they pair drivers with local lawyers to help fight speeding tickets wherever you get them in the US. And so their app is great because, as I've discussed, that's always been my tactic. If I get a ticket somewhere, as I have on 2904 or C2C Express, or just driving around like in the roof going up to the Cars and Coffee in Charlotte, when you find a local lawyer, it massively increases your chances of getting out of the ticket. And so they're an app that makes that easy, and they think that the idea of this car kind of redeeming its honor and driving across the country, and also the opportunity to kind of celebrate the 5-year anniversary of us holding the Cannonball record, was a good opportunity for them to support. So they've agreed to help us financially with the last few remaining items to hopefully get this car ready and sometime this fall drive it across the country. So we'll have hopefully another positive update video soon, but the car is doing well, driving well. I think I've put about 300 miles on it since we got the original shift bushing replaced. And so my hope is get through another 200 or 300 miles, get the dyno oil out of the motor, service it all up, start punching out items, and hopefully before too long, we'll be leaving the red ball.